Hello, everybody. I'm Erick Alonso. I'm the co-founder of Co-Residency. And today we're going to have one more artist spotlight. We're going to be talking to Madison Vander Ark in the United States. Hi, Maddie.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm great. Really good.
Where are you right now? Are you in Pennsylvania? Is that it?
Yes, with my parents, which is really
So
fun.
Let's start with talking about Vander Ark. Where are the Vander Arks from?
We are Dutch, not to be confused with Pennsylvania Dutch. But long ago. Like I don't know a single word of Dutch. So most of my family lives in like Michigan and Montana at this point, but I still like to tote my Dutch heritage and tell every European person I meet that I'm very Dutch.
Where were you born?
I was born in Richmond, Virginia, and then lived in DC for a while, and then we moved to Pennsylvania when I was 7. So this is the house I grew up.
This is the house you grew up.
Yeah.
So how was it like? What was your childhood like? Well, most people don't know, but Michael and you knew each other from childhood, right?
Yep. Yes, we were both homeschooled, and I guess we met in DC. I think because our parents met through some homeschooling thing, or maybe church. I don't know. And yeah, I was homeschooled the whole way through, which was, I loved it. I think whenever I tell people that, they cringe and they're like, "Oh, you like being homeschooled?" But it was so nice. I got to do whatever I wanted to. So if I really enjoyed reading or making art, like I don't think I would be making art if it weren't for that first like 18 years of my life.
Were you doing a lot of art when you were being homeschooled, or when did you realize that you had something different?
I was, I don't know. I think I always enjoyed drawing, and my mom was really, I probably will bring up my mom all the time because she was very prominent in my history, but she always like forced us to draw, which I think is so funny because most parents like force their kids to do math or like, I don't know, sports or something, but she always forced us to make art, which I kind of hated, but also, I don't know, ultimately liked. And there was also this, my sister and I are only 18 months apart, so there was always this sort of like, I don't know, inherent like competition between us, but because I'm older, everything I did was always a little better. It kind of gave me like a false sort of thinking that I was just like really good at making art, which was actually good for me, I think, because it gave me some confidence that I needed.
Should we ask her what she thinks about that?
Yeah, definitely scarred.
What does she do? Is she also doing art?
No, she's but she likes talking to me about art. She's a nurse.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. It's funny. I think my mother forced me to read. That's what she did, but maybe because I was a bit hyperactive, she was like, "You need to stay quiet and then go read a book." And then after that, she's like, "Okay, go play some." But yeah, I think good things happen from those early memories because I still love reading a lot. Yeah. And what else nurtured that gift that you have with painting and plastic arts? Your mother obviously was your community. Did it nurture it in any way, or what can you tell me about that? How was your gift nurtured?
Yeah, well, I think there was there were just like a lot of artists in our community growing up. Mm-hmm. So it never seemed like this sort of crazy like career to pursue. It always seemed very tangible and it made sense to me, which I think a lot of people hear artist and they're like, oh no, starving and poor. But I knew so many people that were fine, so it seemed reasonable.
I think that's a very important thing to say, is many people have that misconception, right? And they stop pursuing that passion because of that stigma. And how lucky were you to have been exposed to, you know, artists that could make a living with their art. Do you remember any of them in particular that caused an impact in you?
Yeah, well, I worked for a sculptor. His name is Ted Prescott, or maybe he goes by Theodore properly. I don't know, Ted Prescott. I worked for him a little in high school and then throughout college. The first year I worked for him, all I did was sand sculptures for him. It was horrible. It was so hot. But he would make me lunch every day, and during that time we would just talk about what it means to make work, and we would just talk about like the art world in general, and I think that was sort of my key into art as a sustainable career. So I mean, I don't know how sustainable it really is, but it does work out, I think. This is something I was teaching a little bit at BU, just TAing at Boston University last year. And something a lot of the students would say is like, I need to get a double major. I can't study art because my parents won't let me. And my answer was always like, if you want it to work, it will. And you'll figure it out. And you might be in really weird situations and have lots of strange jobs all at once, but it works. So
yeah, I think there's a large number of reasons why a person would pursue it or not, but I think that's why I was asking the question of how was that nurtured, because I think there is a lot of artists out there that just let that light become darker and darker, right? And I think you're very lucky that you have this platform to continue to create and to follow this passion.
Well,
go ahead.
I think it's also about just having people in your community who nurture curiosity, which I think is a word I maybe overuse, but allowing yourself to sort of imagine and be curious about the world in a way that's maybe a little more abstract and not as literal as we are constantly asked to process the world. And I think that's something my parents and community did really well, was incite curiosity all the time.
And that's important for artists and for engineers, scientists, and philosophers. Curiosity. You remember we were talking to one of the advisors, Dominic Taylor, and one of the things that really resonated with me was his invitation to reinvent systems.
Right.
Just because we live in a society with the systems that we have doesn't mean that we cannot reinvent them. And as artists, I think that's a big responsibility, but it also sort of expands and adds more meaning to that platform, right?
Right. I totally agree. Yeah.
So by the time you go ahead and say, I'm going to college and I'm going to study art, it was expected.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it wasn't that good at anything else, so.
So where did you go to college? Tell us.
I went to a small liberal arts college here in Pennsylvania, which was called Messiah College and is now Messiah University. And
what was that experience like?
This is so funny. I feel it was good. I really, the art faculty were really encouraging and wonderful. All white and all men, apart from one woman. But that's like also the climate in central Pennsylvania. So I'm not sure what I expected,
Yeah.
but still noteworthy. I definitely felt very fostered. Like I felt very cared for there, which was important.
Mhm.
And I felt like there was this constant, I was constantly being told to like be more confident and stand up for myself, which I need that because I'm bad at doing that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was nice. And I got to work for the sculptor throughout college, which was really informative, I think, as well. And yeah, no regrets. Mixed feelings.
And how, that experience of standing up for yourself and being confident. So during that, I'm assuming that during those 4 years, you connected more with what you wanted to express, right? So what were the topics that surfaced from, you know, connecting with yourself, being more confident and standing up for yourself? What were you painting during your time in Messiah?
Right. Well, I actually was a sculpture major.
Oh.
But then my junior year, I studied abroad in Italy, which was probably the best experience of all the 4 years. And there, I think you know this probably, but like when you relocate to a new city or you live somewhere new, you suddenly start seeing these sort of like ubiquitous or commonplace spaces or objects in a new way.
Yeah.
And so moving to Italy suddenly, I mean, it was only 4 months, but suddenly I became like hyper aware of light and construction materials and abandoned houses that weren't really that pretty. Because, you know, I call it ruin porn. I mean, I think I didn't coin that term, but people are obsessed with like taking pictures of, I don't know, abandoned churches or like schools in Detroit or something. And there's like books everywhere. And I don't know. I'm not super fond of that. But I am interested in those spaces that are likewise abandoned or in ruin, but are actually very boring and sort of commonplace. So anyway, moving to Italy, I think sort of that's where I had that switch where I was like, oh, I think I want to depict these places and shed light on these places and bear witness to the people encountering these places. So yeah,
it almost like it gives them back their dignity, right?
Yeah, right.
They're abandoned. Nobody's looking at them. There's a beauty in them.
Yeah.
But you revive that beauty in them.
Yeah.
So where in Italy were you? I always remember I have an artist friend. He actually is Italian and he lives in Bangkok right now. But I remember him telling me things like, you know, I grew up there, and I haven't seen all the art that Rome has to offer. Like it's endless. It's such an inspiration, right?
It is wild.
I think it.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was going to say, I think that just a testament of that encounter with forms and lights and reviving, it was something that Italy gave you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was in a town that was like, I think an hour by train north of Rome. It's called Orvieto. If you've like done a lot of touring in Italy, you've probably been there because they have this huge Duomo and the whole city is up on a rock. So it sort of limits the growth of the city. So it's really small, which was perfect for studying abroad. Because there is so much to see. It was so nice just having like 4 months to explore this really small place. And I didn't do a lot of traveling when I was there either, which I'm actually thankful for. So.
Yeah, I think like you mentioned, I think it's very important to have these experiences that puts us in different realities, right? That everything that we know, it's suddenly placed somewhere else, and you need to revisit your beliefs, or everything that you've been taught and throughout your life, and then you suddenly say, okay, what works for me and what doesn't. And
Right.
I think it's a wonderful journey, right?
Yeah.
So after Messiah and your time in Italy, you did an MFA, right?
Yes.
Where did you do your MFA?
So I lived in Oregon for a few years, and then, or literally 2. I always say a few, but it was just 2. And then moved to Boston to get my MFA in painting at Boston University. Then I just graduated in May, so it's all very fresh.
And though it's very fresh, can you sort of make the same evaluation of what it gave you? Like for example, Messiah gave you that confidence, standing up for yourself. Italy gave you that connection,
right?
Form and light. What about Boston?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like essentialize my experience there too much, but I guess one thing that it allowed me to do was it allowed me to feel more confident in experimenting and sort of allowing myself to try a lot of different sort of modes of painting, but more so modes of thinking in relation to my painting. And I think the thing with grad school that's just across the board true, I mean, I hate making blanket statements, but I think this is true, is that it sort of speeds up the creative process a bit. So like what I was able to accomplish in 2 years in terms of my practice, probably outside of grad school would have taken me like 10 years. So just this ability to sort of go through ideas really quickly and maybe not like fully flesh them out, but flesh them out enough that I can sort of push it aside and try something new. And yeah, I mean, I learned so much technically also, which was really fun. And it is a very painting heavy program where I went, which I think now it's probably the work I'm doing now is like a reaction against that a little bit. I mean, that's how it always is, right? Like whatever you just experience, suddenly you're like push against that, and whatever you're doing is actually a reaction to the thing you last. So anyway.
Your brain is asking you for something new. You've mastered something, and then you want to keep exploring and expanding, which is great. Is the academia done for you, or would you do a PhD, or?
I don't think so. I don't know.
Too early?
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm not sure what I would do for a PhD. I mean, the thing is, I love school. Like, I'm such a nerd, but I love seminars, and I love like reading with other people. I love book clubs. So
yeah,
I do love school, but I don't see myself pursuing anything else after this. I think I'm done, which is kind of scary to say, but I think I'm done.
Let's see some of your work.
Oh yeah, sure.
So let me share your screen, and I mean, it's going to be great to see paintings of everything that you've been describing.
I'm so obsessed with like story and how everyone has gotten to where they're at, and I think it's really important to remember the past and your own story. But I think I almost remember it to my detriment, if that makes sense. So my initial reaction just now is like, oh, I should have put in a bunch of work from the beginning of grad school so you could see where I've come. But I don't actually think that's important. Like, I think what's important is showing you the work that I'm excited about now. So
anyway. I mean, we can always go back to your portfolio too. Whatever you want to show me, I'm super happy to see.
Okay.
I see this image. That's I think also the cover of your portfolio, right?
Yes, I think so. This
Yeah.
was one of the pieces I did at the end of 2019, end of last year.
And what's the story behind it? Where did you find this space? Because this
So,
is what we were talking about. It's something that if I'm driving around Boston, I would just not even look at it. But if I
right,
see it here, it's, you see the light, you see the movement. I feel like, I don't know, is it winter? Is it summer? You can feel the wind. It's a lot of emotions.
right. So what was really fun about BU was that, I mean, fun and both horrible, was that for the last year and a half, there was a ton of construction being done everywhere, which was great for me because I got a lot of subject matter from it. But so this was just one of the buildings that I sort of frequented on the bottom floor, and it was always covered in tarps, which I find so appealing and sort of sensual almost. And I love the idea of, I mean, the story underneath for this one definitely is a work in progress. I'm not a writer, but essentially it outlines this experience that I have with the tarp, where I'm like touching it, looking at it, and then I pierce it, and then I walk through it. And on the other side, it's this like big ice cave, and it's glittering everywhere. And so I love imagining this as like a fish tank, or I'm glad you mentioned the seasons, because I do think of this as being like something about winter or something behind it. And obviously that didn't actually happen, but that's sort of my like imaginative story that I've created.
But that's what I love about talking. It's a privilege to talk to the artists, right? Because every time I see one of your paintings, I get that feeling of like I'm walking through it, like I can touch it, I can feel it, I can almost smell it. And the fact that you spend time with it, you saw it every day around your building, you walk through it, you touch it, and you actually had that experience before you sat down and painted it. And it's
Right.
incredible that that's the feeling that I get as a viewer, right?
Right. Well, I think that concept of encounter is really important for me, and this idea of accessing both an encounter that I have had, and then the encounter that I'm having while painting or creating this story for myself, and then also the encounter of the viewer with this painting, and how that may change their sort of preconceived notion of these spaces. And yeah.
Do you feel like these spaces sort of call you, like you're walking around and every day you take a look and then you
Yeah.
start walking, or do you have to make that conscious decision before you actually start walking through it? And do you take a photo and then sit down and paint it, or what's the process?
I just have tens of thousands of really horrible photos. Things like this. It's horrible. I sort of organize them, but it gets out of hand. But it's really fun walking around with that was one of the fun things with other people in my grad school, walking around, and we'd all be like, oh, look at this, the way these bricks are lined on these stairs, and we'd all be taking pictures, and it's really just this really boring like stairs that you see every day. But suddenly when you're looking for that, it just changes the way you see everything. And
you said that you're not a writer, but maybe you are, or maybe there's a writer in there somewhere. So you were saying you were talking about the text below, right?
mm-hmm.
So what is it capturing again?
It just tells this story of me encountering this tarp, and then me puncturing it and slowly like sliding my body through, and then finding the space behind it, which is this like glittering ice cave with stalactites. And
Oh.
I actually, this is the only like record of the story that I have, which is on this painting. So it's kind of hard to read.
So were you like writing while you were painting, or did you have a piece of paper that you threw away, or while
Right.
you were
Well,
writing?
I think more, I guess I would say I'm more interested in storytelling than I am in writing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so language and visuals are sort of a means to an end. Like they help me sort of work through these stories that I'm creating in my head, and whether it's through painting or writing, it comes out eventually. And I don't know, the process is still kind of confusing and sort of sticky for me, because usually what happens is I'll experience something and then I just write a little note. I mean, if we're being very literal, I experience something, I write a little note about an idea or this sort of weird daydream that I have, which in this case was this ice cave, and I just wrote a note down. And then later I was like, I think this could be something interesting to paint. So I went back, took more photos, started painting and writing the story at the same time. So that's how this one functioned. But sometimes I'll write something and then not create an image for it, or create a painting for it later. So it sort of is fluid. I don't know. I don't have like an exact method. But it's also because it's so fresh, right? Like I've only been doing this for 9 months. No, I guess a year now. Over a year. Still, I'm very young.
Let's look at the rest that you put on the presentation. Yeah.
This was another one from the end of 2019. This one was really, I think, pivotal for me because it was the first time I made a painting that I had fun.
Really?
Which is
and what was fun about it?
What was fun about it was this repetitive mark, this sort of patterny mark that I got to just zone out and just go. But also, it's not, the thing is, every time I say that, I feel like I hear voices saying, well, why don't you just make abstract work that's all about the pattern? And the thing is, it's about the pattern and the process.
That's what I thought when you were telling me that, actually.
Right.
So what did the voice say after that? What was the answer to the question?
The answer is, it is about the process and the mark, but it's also so much about what it's adding up to and what it's building up to, which at least for now, maybe in 5 years this will change, I don't know. But for now, what's so exciting about making this mark is zoning out and then zoning back in and seeing this fabric grow before me, which was so exciting, just from like one little paintbrush and basically 2 colors.
And what was the location of this place? Where did you find this space, and what was your experience finding it?
This one was actually here in Harrisburg. There was a house on the corner that had been covered in this tarp, and there were these pink stripes that were coming down all over the house. And it was so incredible because it was winter, and winter in Pennsylvania, or here in Pennsylvania, is so bleak, and there's no snow. It's just gray and brown and kind of cold, but like not cold enough to feel that cozy. It's horrible. And so seeing this house in this bright pink color was just so exhilarating. So I went in and took a bunch of photos, and I was like standing in the road and taking pictures, which was fun. And then the story that kind of goes along with this, and I incorporated some audio. I had someone, actually our neighbor here, who's she's 13 now, but at the time she was 11. I had her record this story that I had written about sort of the same idea. It's like encountering this tarp, opening it, crawling inside, even though you're not allowed to, and then finding this sort of magical space. I don't know. I don't want to use the word magical lightly, I guess. An invented space. There we go.
And again, and this is very unique of my personal experience of your work. There, I could almost smell that. I think it's plastic. I can hear it moving with the wind. I can feel it, right? It's something that not every painting I see makes me feel, right? It makes me connect to many of my senses, which is pretty unique.
Right. Well, that's wonderful to hear.
And it does makes you think, like it also makes you curious, like what's behind it? Can I go through, like is something coming out of it?
Right.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed this one more than others.
Yeah, it was a breakthrough, I think. Feeling joy while painting, while doing anything is
and did you think that experience of doing the patterns, and it's almost like a meditation to you, because you're like need to quiet yourself and be with yourself and your thoughts for a long time, and then you see this piece of art, right?
Yeah, I think I do meditate sometimes, and I think for me meditation often involves, I mean, I'm not a pro, I don't really know, but for me it involves an emptying of thoughts and sort of allowing yourself just to focus on, for me, I just focus on my breath. So with painting, I think it's less about that and more about giving my brain room to daydream and like giving me this sort of what's the word? The excuse to not think about the things I should be thinking about. So it rather than emptying out thoughts, I think it allows better thoughts to come in, or different thoughts to come in, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was recently talking to this lady she's in Italy now, but she studied in Japan, and she's a Zen master. So she talks about these things about experiences with meditation, and breathing it's a topic that she focuses a lot of time on. But she also talks about that space of meditation where I think it's almost like you're describing it. You're emptying yourself from all this noise inside until there's nothing but yourself, or yourself and God, if that's what you believe in, or whatever you call it. It's emptying yourself until there's nothing. Right. And I think then from that space, all those, I guess, more important thoughts come in. Right. And that has to be wonderful. How many people get to do that in their job, right? Sitting in front of a computer, writing documents, and you have this incredible connection while you're doing your job of painting.
Right.
How amazing is that?
Yeah. It feels very indulgent a lot of the time, but I think it is important. But it also just feels good, which is nice.
Yeah, and I'm assuming it ultimately makes you happier too. Yes.
Well, yeah. Happier and also way more stressed. I don't know. It's
where's the stress? Where's the stress of
well, I guess I just meant not in terms of the process we've been discussing, but just in terms of making art in general. And
does it feel just like everybody, like, oh, I have a deadline, or oh, I need to do this stuff? Do you get that? Like, oh, I'm not doing art, I need to be doing something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. And I think anything, also just growing up and really embodying sort of like Calvinist Christian theology, and this idea that I'm born a sinner and born with all these responsibilities and duties, and I shouldn't be pleasing my body. I should be glorifying God. And anyway, I don't want to get too much into this, but I feel like that sort of mentality is just, it's so hard for me to get rid of. So the minute that I'm having a self-indulging moment or experiencing pleasure, it's like, I don't know how to handle it, and it stresses me out. But
I think so. And I think, well, I can speak for myself also. Growing up in Costa Rica is a very Christian country, right? And there's good and bad things about that. And I think there's a lot of good intentions that go into what we're being taught, but also it can cause a lot of harm, right? So there's a point in our lives where we have to do exactly what you sort of did in Italy as well, right? Where we have to like have that moment of reckoning of like, okay, this is if this is real and it's supposed to be good, it's supposed to make me happy. So how where am I going to find it? And maybe you find it in painting, maybe you find it in gardening, maybe you find it in writing. But yeah, I ultimately believe that that your relationship with or our relationship with let's say a higher power should ultimately make us happier, right? It should not be something that makes me feel anxiety or guilt or any of those things. And I think when you get to that space, it allows you to love yourself and it allows you to love others, which is the ultimate message of any religion, I think.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, let's see more of your work. So this is you exploring installation, right?
Mm-hmm. I'm done.
How did that happen?
I did a couple of things in college, but never this big. This was a collaborative installation with my friend Diana Walsh, and I think we were both interested in, I was really interested in using fabric to create a structure because I like that idea of something that's really fluid and breakable and kind of permeable, forcing it in and constricting it into these right-angled sort of architectural spaces. So I like the contradiction of that. So, and we were both interested in playing with bodies moving through space. And so with this, can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
There's this maze in here where we cut slits in the fabric and you have to go in through here. And it was not, we only had 3 weeks to do this. So the maze is not that elaborate, but there is one dead end and a couple people did get stuck through there. And I like the idea. I think it's important there's this sort of chicken and egg problem, right? Or not problem, like understanding of architecture. Did the architecture form us and how we move, or have we built the architecture and we form the architecture? Like it's kind of twofold. And so that's why this was really fun to make, because it was telling our bodies where to go and how to move. Yet the fabric, like you could just tear it down in a second and you could have just forced your way through. And then inside, we had this sort of egg form that you could go in this slit over here, and that was all blackout fabric. And when you look out, you are looking at this, where there is a one-way mirror. So when you look inside of it from the outside, being so confusing right now, when you're looking outside into it, you see yourself, the reflection of yourself. And when you're inside looking out, you just see the people looking into the holes. So I like this idea of viewership too, and sort of
and that inside is that brag yellow golden figure.
So the other side of this egg sort of form was we painted it gold. And I think there's so many discrepancies between inner and outer experiences, or inner and outer, or inner and outer selves, and the inside and the outside of things. And so I think this was fun to make, because on the outside it just looks like this sort of organic, I don't know, blob of mud or something, and then on the inside it's actually like a geode or something really beautiful and gold.
And I don't know if this was intentional, but it obviously, to me personally, it speaks about that internal journey, right? Or like, for example, I always mention that one of the topics that I would like to explore in other cohorts is mental health care and development trauma, which is a topic that I've been exploring in the past year or so. And it's that idea that sometimes when you have traumatic experiences, it sort of almost feels like that muddy egg, right? And then in order to have that journey to reconnect with yourself, or sort of rewire the map of your brain, it's almost like going through that maze to ultimately look inside and realize that, have that moment where you're alone without all those thoughts and all that noise. And I think that I personally believe that that's everybody inside. You're golden, you're unique, you're beautiful. There's a space where nobody can touch you and hurt you, or there's an essence to in each and every one of us. Right. So that would be the interpretation that I make of this.
That's wonderful.
If I had that experience, but I don't know if it was intentional at all.
Yeah, no, Michael the other day was telling me, he explained the definition of trauma, which is having an experience that alters your preconceived notion of something, which I think sort of speaks to that too. And this piece is not about trauma, but I like that idea of experiencing something that just changes what you thought you knew about something, and allows you to access that inner golden egg.
Yeah, I think so. And I think beyond trauma, I think everybody who's old enough as you and I are, like, has experienced one thing or another that's been painful, or has altered our perception of the world. And I think a lot of what we're experiencing in the world right now has forced us to just go inside and, face that maze. and if you're lucky enough, you will find the golden egg.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see that transition between your painting and now the exploration that you're doing with installations here.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's kind of confusing. I feel like I'm always all over the place, which is a good thing to realize about myself, but it also is hard in terms of making work, because I'm always feeling like I'm pulled in different directions. But I don't know. It's probably ultimately good for my practice.
Yeah. I have a good friend that died 2 years ago, and he used to, there's an Italian phrase that says, "Va dove ti porta il cuore," go where your heart leads you. And it sounds very cheesy, but in reality, to actually listen to what your heart wants and act upon it, it takes some guts, right? So
that's very tough.
Listen to whatever that heart wants to expand and go. Keep listening, because look what you can make.
Yeah. I thought I would include this. This was a fabric piece I just did this winter or spring, I guess. It was just included in a New England fair called Area Code, which was fun. But I think, again, I'm really interested in the contradiction of this transparent, very fragile fabric and this architecture that it can look like. So of course I like Dohosa, but for this piece, I was interested in mimicking the architecture behind it and creating this sort of like cobweb, or someone pointed out to me how it looks like an elevator, which I love. The idea of like putting this sheer elevator in this really old house that I was staying in Vermont when COVID first hit. This was my first COVID piece, I guess. So before the residency. And I really want to continue doing work like this too, but I'm going to the next one. And then this was an installation I did in my now studio, which is a garden shed, but I love it. And I guess I'm really interested in this idea of veiling and covering of something, and the sort of like liminal space that it creates between whatever is behind and whoever you are. And in this I was playing with the idea of doubling, so having like an actual object, which is the tarp, and then the painted tarp. And then I hung that fabric piece in here too, the elevator piece.
Yeah. And why the color blue?
I mean, it's a classic like construction color, which I liked. But also I think I've just been attracted to blues and grays for a long time because of how it creates a sort of atmosphere that is, it feels like it is, I haven't actually talked about this very much. Let me rethink this. The color blue often speaks to these atmospheres that are like fully embodying. So I think of water, and that is one of my favorite sensations, of like falling into water and just having it completely consume you. Or like the sky, which is something that is like tangible and it's there, but it's also really ephemeral and you're not really sure how it exists. So I like how blue speaks to atmosphere and like a physical sort of experience of the world. And it's just like a classic construction color. So.
But I think it's, you say that now you're like working with fabric and veils, but I think through most of what we've seen, it's like a recurrent topic, right? Like whether it's painting it and spending so much time recreating those patterns, or the elevator that we saw. And you talked a little bit about it, like in this particular case, you talked about veiling and what's it covering, right? What else can you tell us about that that topic of veils and fabrics?
Right. Well, I really I like this idea of there's how like and anytime you see a veil, it's should be pulled back, right? Or there's something behind it. Like a veil doesn't just exist as a veil. It's always about what's behind. And I think I came to this veiling idea because I was interested in liminal space, and in these spaces of passage and passing through. So like I loved public transportation sites. I made a few paintings in Boston of that. Or like bathrooms, I think, are interesting because you never just go to a bathroom to hang out in a bathroom. You only go there to finish something, or you're like passing through it. Or airports even. You would never go to an airport just to be in an airport. It's always about going to the next destination. So I think veils came sort of naturally out of that interest in sort of passing through. And of course, I mean, I don't know, this is kind of cliche, but also the idea of uncovering something, I think, is like the role of the artist, and is something I'm interested in just in general. Unveiling things, uncovering things, getting to the root of something. but it's that action of unveiling, or that action of like encountering a veil, that I think is the most powerful for me.
Yeah. Oh, even in the Christian tradition, the tearing apart of the veil was a great symbol that now you have access to the divine. Like you can enter that space anytime that you want, right?
That was one of my favorite images that I still is like so vivid for me, and it's definitely like a 6-year-old memory. But reading that when the veil breaks, or not breaks, it like rips in the tabernacle. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And they describe it as being,
So.
or my parents at least described it as being like 12 feet or 12 inches thick. And so I love that idea of this like super thick, sort of like mushy fabric just tearing apart. It's so satisfying. But yeah, it is very biblical. I would agree.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I came to this too soon.
What are these ones?
I just included this because I think the start of the residency was, I was thinking about veiling, but also about trying to work through what it is that's behind it. And of course, I just came to another type of veil, which is a cave. And so I don't really know what's necessarily in the cave, but I am really interested in the concept of caves and how they keep you safe and they isolate you like a veil can. And they sort of mark a territory. And I like the sort of hidden aspect of a cave too, and how they feel so like this space that's sort of untouchable, or this space that's sort of precious. And yeah, and also like obviously within this time of quarantine, my home has started to feel very cavey. And so all of these drawings are sort of from this suburban area where I now live. Hopefully not for too much longer, but and thinking about this suburb as a sort of like cave that is very insulated, which is both, I don't know, fostering of allows me to grow and allows me to feel safe, but it also allows me to not think about ideas beyond this sort of community or suburban area. So I don't know. Again, I'm really interested in contradiction all the time.
Yeah, I think the shape of those caves, or the size of the cave, or like it has a different impact on whomever is living in there. I was actually today I have a friend who's an architect, and she sent me this video. I'll send it to you after our conversation. And I don't want to misquote it, but pretty much it was talking about hip hop culture and how it does more to reshape the world than we actually paid attention to, and even there's an influence to architecture. But when they were talking about architecture, they were talking about, I really don't want to misquote this, but there was an architect that created these spaces where Black communities live. And there was a psychologist previously that had been making these studies with rats, and he put them in spaces like these towers, and the towers the rats started to behave in different ways, right? And they became more violent, or they just were not the same rats anymore. So there was that aspect of psychology that he sort of warned before these sort of projects were taken into account and spread around, I guess, the United States and other countries also. But they were talking a little bit about how he sort of warned us that, that this could have an impact on the people that are living in these
Right.
in these buildings, right?
Huh.
Yeah.
I would
Caves
love
are incredibly interesting. Yeah, I'll send you that video.
Yeah.
Caves are incredibly they are incredible symbols, right?
Right. Well, I'm like very. I mean, I'm aware that I'm not the first person to think caves are interesting.
Yeah,
I'm not super interested in, I don't know, Plato's idea of like the of a philosopher sort of like coming out of the cave and then eventually like realizing, what is it like? I mean, I don't know very much about philosophy, but realizing that like math or understanding maths and sciences, and that's when he actually finally exits the cave, is when he like accesses this higher power, which is math and science. Anyway, I'm not really thinking about that very much, but I am very aware that caves are overdone.
Yeah, but that's something that's been a topic that we've discussed with other artists in co-residency, right?
Yeah, I know. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
A lot of us have been gravitating towards that image.
Yeah, I mean, keep exploring it. Again, vado, veti, porta il cuore. Go where your heart leads you. And I think that if this is what's calling you, that's what you should explore. Yeah.
Yeah. The next slides I have are all like co-residency slides.
Yeah. So before we go into that, I mean, obviously I'd love to see them, but so I remember in the beginning you wanted to explore a lot with the work that you wanted to do for co-residency. Was exploring a lot with the feeling, the touch, right? And again, you're exploring doing an installation, which I love that idea too. That you're moving in that direction. We started our conversation in March, and there's many things that have happened during our time, or the 12 weeks of the program. So tell us about that idea that you initially had with co-residency, and how has it been reshaped through all those events. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think after graduating and also with quarantine, I just became hyper aware of this need for touch and awareness of and having an awareness of all of our senses. And so that was sort of what I was interested in pursuing with my own work during this residency. And I think how that's manifested has been more surprising, because I thought it was going to be more about how can I have viewers experience touch and experience this sort of embody like a feeling when they see art. But I think it's turned out to be more about how I process touch and how touch is important for me. And so this is something I've been thinking a lot about, which is so silly, but I'm just going to say it anyway. There's this scene in the animated Wind in the Willows. I don't know if you've seen that movie. It's from 1995. No. But there's this one scene where Toad is in jail, and this woman is bringing Toad some food. And before she brings him the food, it's buttered toast. And before she brings it to him, there's these like wafts of steam that kind of come into his cell and are going through his nose. And it's animated, so of course it's like really exaggerated. And she walks in with this toast, and it's kind of jiggling on the plate, and the butter just looks so delicious and like this perfect yellow color. And I think this feeling, this sort of sensual feeling while watching something just with your eyes, is what I'm really interested in. And so I've used this sort of buttered toast as this weird rubric for myself the past couple months where I'll make something and I'll be like, okay, Maddie, is this buttered toast? And often it's not, but I'm really trying to make everything feel buttered toast. So yeah, I think it's been less about creating an actual like space or texture and more about understanding my relationship to touch and how my art can access that for myself and in turn other people. But I think it's been important understanding touch for me during this time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think we've all seen these viral videos where grandchildren see their grandparents for the first time, or they have to hug each other through a plastic or things like that. And when you see that reaction of joy is very primitive, right? It's almost, and it's very big, like they cannot contain it, right?
Yeah, totally.
The power of
right.
So let's get that sneak peek into the work that you're gonna present for co-residency. I think we'll do it on an Instagram live, and obviously we'll put it in our website eventually. But guide us through it a little bit.
So I've been thinking about caves, and I've been wanting to make this sort of, I've been thinking about it as like a secret garden sort of. So I've been trying to make work that deals with my own body and also with actually puncturing through that veil and seeing what lies beneath, I guess. So I'm working on this structure currently. It's mostly done at this point, but I don't have pictures of it finished. On the left are some maquettes, and then this is the frame. And originally it was supposed to be like a painting viewing space. So I wanted there to be a painting in the back and then you to come in, and I was just interested in instead of just looking at a painting, having like a full body experience while looking at a painting. But I decided the painting wasn't actually very important. So now it's just about creating a cave and space. My poor parents, they have been very generous with their space. But it's plaster sheets. And again, it's not, these pictures are not of it finished, but it's just been really fun playing with all these different materials. And creating a space for reflection. And
this is somewhere in your parents' backyard.
This is, yes. Sorry.
Can the neighbors see it?
Oh yeah, I get lots of comments.
What do they say?
They always just ask what it is, but often they will make sort of guesses, which I love. Someone asked if it was a outdoor shower once. Someone's asked if it was a porta potty. But I love that. Like I love how art or these objects that I'm making can speak to sort of everyday things. I mean, I guess an outdoor shower isn't that ubiquitous, but a porta potty is. And I do sort of think of this as a porta potty, right? Like this sort of isolation and this tiny space that suddenly becomes fully your own and you're away from everything else. And sure, it smells really bad, but you get.
And it plays some role in a community where people are isolated, and at least they can look at that and say, what's happening? Right?
Yes.
And I don't know, ultimately, do you think that once it's completed, people can come and see it? That would be incredible.
Yeah, so that's my plan, is to create this sort of secret garden installation in my current studio where that tarp piece was. There I'm gonna have some paintings that I've been working on, these objects that I've been creating that again deal with my body during the past 4 weeks or 4 months. and or I guess more than 4 months now. And also this structure will be in there. And I'm not sure what the next image is. I'm just gonna press it. Okay, so this is one of the objects also that will be included in there. And
it's inside. That's inside.
Yeah.
Oh, and it reminds me of the entry, right? Like that big gate, right?
Right. So I'm very interested in entry and puncturing and moving through spaces. So this sort of functions as like a little cave, but also as a garment or a hood.
Yeah.
And it's not finished quite yet. It is, but not in this image. The inside is all painted. And
I think I once told you that this particularly reminds me of like Amish woman. Part of my bachelor's, I did it in Kenyon College, Ohio, and the Amish were always there, and this is what it brings me back to.
That's so funny. I mean, I watched this show called Unorthodox recently. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's about a Hasidic Jewish community in Williamsburg. And it shows their culture and the way that the women have to cover themselves constantly. And I think that is so interesting. Like all the women are wearing wigs, and this idea of covering your head and how that's a symbol of holiness or of cleanliness, I think is really interesting. But also how kind of grotesque that can be. And I like the idea of covering. So this is just my first piece of clothing of sorts.
It looks great. I think the first image of this I saw it was a video, and it to see it moving it almost looked like computer generated. It was great.
Yeah, it's very strange. I'm using this plaster that's amazing. You just dip it, or I dip the fabric in the plaster, and it only takes like 4 minutes to dry.
Wow.
So it's really fun. I really liked making it.
So you mentioned that initially you wanted to set attention on a painting, and then that idea expanded. Is there still a painting inside of the installation?
No, not anymore. Instead I'm just focusing on the well, at least for that cave sculpture thing that I'm making. I'm focusing more on the texture of it and sort of the sensation of potentially touching it for viewers.
Yeah.
And I do have some paintings. This is one I just did. It's not, well, I guess it is finished, but I've been thinking a lot. I included this right after this one because this is the grass that is everywhere. I forgot about suburban grass and how funny it is that people just have massive yards and like aren't doing anything with them. And so I've been painting this grass over and over, and it sort of is that, like, it creates that sort of meditation space for me, or this zoning out rather space for me. So this is a smaller painting. It's like, I don't know, 24 by 24 or something.
And it's somewhere inside the installation, or?
No, so this will be in the installation, but not in the cave sculpture itself, if that makes sense.
So what's PA1?
That was just spray paint that was on some cement. And I'm obsessed with these spray painted marks that are everywhere, that I just think it's so funny how there's like these neon bright colors all over the sidewalk or all over the street that we've just tuned out completely, and no one has any idea what they mean except for construction workers. And I looked up this chart once, or someone sent it to me actually, of what the different colors mean, and they actually do correlate to different construction materials. So like paint, I'm just making this up, but white means gas, yellow means electric, green means water, something like that. But what I liked the most was that pink meant they didn't know what it was. so it's just like this, I don't know, something is there, and so we're just going to mark it with pink, but we don't know what it means. So last year I made a few paintings with that fluorescent pink color because I like that unknown or undefined space. But this was just some random like white spray paint that I thought was funny. It said PA because I'm in PA, so I don't know. I put it there.
So if I go to see the installation, I can see this cement PA whatever around, right? It's gonna be there somewhere. Because one of the things that I keep thinking about is like, okay, first it was all this notion about going inwards and then the world outside and all of those things, but it's also about, you talk about the magical and that you didn't want to, so lightly talk about the magical, but is this also an idea of entering a cave and discovering something magical there, or exiting the cave and what's beyond the cave? Is it the real world, or is it something different, and what is there? And then this is the same thing, like, I'm outside in this thing that I perceive to be the reality, but then I'm experiencing looking at this in the form of a painting. And I don't know, it makes me think of Lewis Carroll and Alice Behind the Mirror, and that idea of a different world. It's different, it's the same, but it's different, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's about both of those things. I mean, of course, growing up very Christian, I was obsessed with like Narnia and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and what other books did I really? The Perilous Guard. I don't know. There's a lot of books where a child, or Magic Tree House even, where a child encounters something, and once they choose to sort of let go of responsibility, they enter into this space, and then suddenly they're in a whole new world. Like I can't get enough of that. I'm still a child. Yeah. I love that. But I think that's ultimately what I'm interested in, allowing myself to let go of responsibility and enter into this world of imagination and the unknowable. And so I think this painting, at least for me, it is so much about, I mean, I didn't think about it until after I finished it, where I was like, oh my God, I'm making suburban paintings now. Like, this grass is so much about and the spray paint is so much like a mark of Camp Hill, where I'm staying. But at the same time, it's like this underwater sort of seaweed world that it's a double world. It's like the in Stranger Things, the Upside Down. I kind of feel like it's that, but not scary. It's just exciting.
Yeah.
And I think that's the last image. Yeah. I have more for the installation, but I didn't want to include it because it's not fully realized, and I don't want to have to.
Sure, and then we will see the finished product soon, right? Mm-hmm. We're still working on how we'll present it and all of those things. Mm-hmm. But this was a great sneak peek into it.
Yeah, it's fun.
I have some questions for you. Whenever I have these conversations with the artists, we always finish it with quick fire questions. And this is inspired by, James Lipton, who died this year. He used to be the host of the Actors Studio, for the Inside the Actors Studio show. And he had these questions at the end of his show that were ultimately inspired by the Proust questionnaire. So this is not exactly the questions that he asked, but they're inspired
right.
by that. So whatever comes to your mind, just let me know. Who is your favorite artist?
I mean, I hate questions that have to do with favorites, because I feel like I'm always waffling between so many things and changing. But I've been reading a lot of George Saunders recently. he's a writer and an artist, obviously. He's just so funny and kind of describes these dystopian worlds in really short stories, which I find really fascinating. So I guess I would say him right now.
So who are your favorite heroines or heroes, fiction or nonfiction?
I was thinking about this, and this is such a cop-out, but I've been watching this show about Malcolm X, and I'm so obsessed with him now, which is like, should have come to this sooner, Maddie, but I'm really obsessed with Malcolm X right now.
What's your favorite word, and what is your least favorite word?
Oh, I didn't think about this one at all. I don't know. I mean, I love any word that sounds like what it is. Right? So like plonk, or like, is that even a word? Or bonk or punch, like things that really sound like what they are. And least favorite words are probably words that sound like what they are but are disgusting, like moist, for example. Horrible.
What turns you on and what turns you off?
I think what turns me off the most, at least recently, I've been thinking about this, like pretense and performance. And I think it's only because I'm hyper aware of how I try to perform all the time. So when I see it in other people, I'm like, I hate that. Really turns me off. And what turns me on? Talking about emotions.
What sound or noise do you love, and what sound or noise do you hate?
I love being read to so much. And I hate my parents' cats meowing. She's horrible.
What's your favorite place in the world?
Actually, right now, I would say submerging myself in water. So just the ocean. I'm obsessed with like being underwater at the ocean. It's the best feeling ever.
Yeah. What inspires you to continue doing your work?
I think it's this sort of, I mean, it's curiosity, right? Which is what we've been talking about this whole time. But this itch that I feel like I have to scratch, that there's something other than what I'm experiencing every day. Like it's this need to access this higher power or this other thing that's keeping us all going, because it can't just be this. And I think making work helps me process that. So
what's your idea of happiness, and what's your idea of misery?
I think the answer for both would be being alone in the studio. Like making work is both happiness and complete misery.
Wow. What does this global crisis mean to you?
I think for me, it's been a time of recognizing all these disparities that we have, socially, economically, culturally in America, but also it's been this liminal space of without any sort of routine. And I think that's sort of interesting, having months where the entire world is sort of in this space of not knowing, and having to come to terms with not knowing. So Yeah, basically COVID is just, it's all an art project. Yeah, no, I think it's been, yeah, I'm just gonna stop talking.
Maddy Vander Ark, finish these sentences for me. Art is
important.
Art allows me to
Feel.
Without art,
I would lose my sense of wonder and curiosity.
keep curious. Keep taking
Curious.
keep showing us what's behind that veil. Keep walking us to these spaces that are probably closer to reality than we realize. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful conversation. We're very lucky to have you in our team.
I'm so thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for everything.